in all your queries.
Good evening, everybody. You're watching Prime Time. My name is ICICI, and let's take a look at today's headlines. The iPhone X is sold out within hours of going on sale in India on e-commerce platforms like Flipkart and Amazon. The Madras High Court dismisses the plea seeking a ban on Tamil movie Mersal, says freedom of expression is also valid when it comes to movies. Reports suggest President Donald Trump is leaning towards appointing Federal Reserve Governor Jerome Powell to be the next chairman of the Fed. ICICI Bank's profit falls short of estimates in the second quarter, but asset quality remains steady. Sluggish demand post-GST launch hits ITC hard. Margin contracts in quarter two as the cigarette segment takes a beating. Maruti Suzuki's profit rises at the slowest pace in 3 years, but the country's largest car maker manages to maintain margins at nearly 17%. An Indian market snapped a 4-session winning streak, but the Sensex posts its best weekly gains in over 7 months. Private equity players may be allowed to promote Indian insurers, but the regulator may make it difficult to exit. Now our top story. It's the phone that everyone has been waiting for. The Apple iPhone X was made available for pre-orders today. But it was a case of you blink and you miss. Literally, online players in India like Amazon and Flipkart started pre-order sales at 12:30 in the afternoon. And within hours, the phone was sold out. It's important to note here that online players have a limited stock of pre-order devices. And Apple has not said when it plans to have a second batch of pre-orders for the Indian market. And of course, also, offline sales are separate. Now, this huge appetite for the iPhone X will come as a welcome boost for Apple, especially given the poor sales for the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus. So will Apple be able to live up to the heightened demand, given that it's struggling with supply-side issues? That's a Bloomberg report. We'll be discussing that a little later on the show. We're going to have a tech expert, and of course, we're going to have our colleagues from Bloomberg joining us as well. Now, moving on to our next story. Now, private sector lender ICICI Bank missed street estimates after reporting a net profit of 2,058 crore rupees in the September quarter. The bank's total income and other income too showed a drop during the period. The biggest surprise, though, was on the asset quality front, where the bank reported an improvement. Now, just to dissect and analyze what all of this really means, well, we have with us a Bloomberg Quint's Vishwanath Nair, who interacted with the management, and he's going to take us through some of the key takeaways from the results of Vishy. So the asset quality numbers have surprised the market. Can we stick out our neck and say that things have actually gotten better?
Well, yes and no. What is happening here, Ayush, is that as compared to the last financial year, obviously the asset quality numbers have improved significantly. Last year, during the same quarter, the bank had shown slippages worth close to 8,000 crore. This quarter, this has come down to 4,600 odd crore. So obviously that is clearly an improvement as far as the asset quality number goes, as far as the fresh slippages number go. But an important point to notice also is that the Reserve Bank of India has been conducting this risk-based supervision across private sector banks, across all banks actually, and looking at their finances for the financial year ended March 2017. And what has happened, at least in the previous 2 or 3 cases, in case of Axis Bank as well as Yes Bank, there have been large divergences where the RBI believed that the NPA number should have been X and the bank has reported a much lower number at Y, and therefore the RBI is asking banks to sort of bridge that gap and start classifying those assets as bad. That exercise is still continuing with ICICI Bank, and it's not over yet. So which means that the RBI has not submitted a final report to the bank's management, and till that happens, the bank cannot announce a divergence. So according to Chanda Kochar, the MD and CEO of the bank, that number is likely to come in the 3rd quarter. So that is a number that we will be watching closely for the October-December quarter, whether that shows a large divergence and possibly could throw off this trajectory of good results that ICICI Bank has been showing over the last few quarters.
Right, Rishi, and also when it comes to, well, the buzzword really seems to be, the buzzword in banking, especially after Axis and Yes Bank, seems to be divergence.
you're right. So that divergence figure is going to be the one thing that is going to determine whether ICICI Bank's results are actually that good. Now remember, even in Yes Bank's case, the number, while was changed for FY17, in the 6 months so far this year, that has been revised because the bank has been able to either recover or upgrade the loans, whatever that means. We will be watching closely what ICICI Bank does with that number. If it reports a significant divergence, what has the bank been doing over the 3 quarters? Because by the time 3 quarters were passed, so 3 quarters of this financial year, and how it has managed to sort of turn this around and get those loans back in order. that is the one aspect of the result that will be closely watched, because apart from that, operationally the bank is sound. The asset increase, the total advances rise has been considerable. Domestic advances have grown by about 13%. And as well as, we have seen deposits also grow significantly. So we listen to what Chanda Kochhar has said about the asset quality and what our outlook is for the bank.
So as far as the additions to NPA is concerned, well, I think it's a little bit diversified. Some part of it is the normal course of addition to the retail portfolio. The other is partly from the drill down list, from the restructured portfolio, partly a couple of larger accounts that we had spoken of even in addition to the drill down list. So I think it's spread across, but the more important point is that if you look at the last 6 quarters, there has been actually a reduction in the addition to NPA, and this was 4,674 crores is lower than even 4,976 crores of the previous quarter, and 8,029 crores of the same quarter last year. The RBI, I mean, it's not audit, actually it's the annual inspection. We are yet to receive the final report, but I think overall on NPA addition as such, I would say that what we had said at the beginning of the year, that we expect the additions to NPA during this year to be substantially lower than the additions in the previous year.
All right, that was Chanda Kochhar of ICICI. Now, let's see how the ICICI ADR is trading at the moment. On your screens right now, well, it seems to be trading around 8.86 at the moment. That's from the Bloomberg terminal on your screens. Now, with the ICICI Bank's Q2 earnings, almost 6 private sector lenders have already reported their earnings. Shraddha Babla, Bloomberg Quinn, compares the private sector lenders with their peers in this report.
Well, the trend of outperformance by retail-focused bank over corporate-heavy private sector lenders continued in this quarter as well, with the exception of Yes Bank, and we will talk more about that. But let's start with looking at the operational performance of some of these private banks and compare them. Now, if you look at these retail-oriented banks like Kotak, IndusInd Bank and HDFC Bank and Yes Bank, these have actually managed to grow in double digits when it comes to the operational performance, whereas Axis and ICICI Bank, which are both corporate heavy, have actually seen a negative degrowth. For ICICI Bank, of course, a higher base which had significant capital gains last year from stake sale in ICICI Prudential also had a role to play as far as that negative growth is concerned. But if we look at the net profit growth, it paints a similar picture with all the retail-oriented banks growing at much higher levels, double-digit levels, 20+% levels. And now if we compare the loan growth, again, all of these banks have, in fact, all the private banks have continued to grow in double digits, with the exception of ICICI Bank, which has grown at a subdued 6.3%. Now, if you look at the capital adequacy ratios as well, all private banks continue to remain well capitalized in this quarter as well. But the most important point is how the asset quality picture has changed from the June-ended quarter. So if we look at Axis Bank, we have seen a major spike as far as the gross NPA number is concerned, and yet another one that really stands out is Yes Bank, where on a sequential basis the gross NPA number is actually double. Kotak is the only bank where we have seen some marginal improvement. Now the reasons for Axis and Yes Bank to see this big jump in the NPA number could also be the sharp divergence that they have reported post RBI RBI's audit, both have reported close to 6,000 crores of gross NPA divergence. When it comes to ICICI Bank, of course, the NPA ratios were steady at around 7.9%. That's because the management did say that they're still awaiting the final report on divergence from the RBI. But overall, as we can see, the past trends have continued. Asset quality has remained relatively better for these private-oriented banks, while the corporate-heavy banks continue to see significantly higher gross NPA numbers. But the biggest surprise this quarter, of course, has been Yes Bank, where we have seen a major spike and underreporting as far as NPAs are concerned. So that's how the picture looks like as far as the earnings in the second quarter of private banks are concerned.
Well, on to the other big earnings of the day. Maruti Suzuki beats estimates in the second quarter. The net profit grew by 22% on a year-on-year basis, and the net profit grew by 3% and came in at 2,484 crores, with the buzz growing around development of electrical vehicles. In a conversation now with Bloomberg Quint's Krishanu Mukherjee, R.C. Bhargava, the chairman of the company, says he has no plans of developing electrical vehicles. Listen in.
Suzuki is already developing electric cars in Japan for a long time, and it doesn't make any sense for us to duplicate what they're doing in India.
But in terms of providing help to them, considering there is a lot of R&D here also, you have a facility in India, a lot of expertise could be sent from here also?
We don't have expertise in electric cars. We have expertise, but all expertise is not suitable for electric cars.
So my second question would be about hybrids. You manufacture hybrids, two of your cars are hybrid vehicles, and after this cess has come under GST, the tax rate has gone over the roof. You said the sales have come down.
Yeah.
Are you in talks with the government to get it down further? Because after the cess was increased for other cars, hybrid is now lower by default. Has that aided any sales? And what is the outlook for hybrids going ahead?
No, hybrid is still higher than the tax on the non-hybrid cars. And that's why the hybrid sales have come down. And we are requesting government to actually have a rate for hybrids which is not higher than the normal cars. It should be lower than the normal cars. Otherwise, why would customers buy a hybrid car?
You've spoken about that as the interim phase. Hybrids are the interim to move to electric vehicles. If the rate doesn't come down, you've said that sales have gone down since the rate has gone up. What are Maruti's plans vis-a-vis hybrids? Do you plan to stop manufacturing them? Are we going to see more models with hybrid engines instead of diesel engines?
What is happening is that the number of hybrids being sold has become smaller. Right. I think that trend will continue. Some people are still willing to buy the hybrids at a higher price, but that number is small. So what will happen going forward is that we'll continue to sell more conventional cars and smaller number of hybrids.
So can we see, do you have no other models planned with hybrid engines? Are we going to see launches with diesel engines instead?
No, I don't think you'll see that happening. But hybrids can be extended to petrol also.
Well, that's an interesting conversation when it comes to Maruti Suzuki's plans with electric and hybrid cars. You can catch that whole conversation on www.bloombergquint.com. Now, moving on, while HUL shrugged off the GST blues, ITC seems to still be recovering from the tax hangover. In its quarterly earnings report, ITC said that its two main businesses, cigarettes and consumer goods, continue to be under pressure. Agam Vakil from our research desk filed this report earlier in the day on the key highlights from ITC's Quarter 2 scorecard.
It was a largely quiet quarter for ITC. Starting off at the top line, we saw about 7% growth at a little over 10,300 crores. And we did see a contraction in EBITDA margins coming in at around 36.5%. Consequently, profits were largely in line with street expectations, coming in at around 2,640 crores with a growth of around 6%. Now, in terms of cigarettes, the initial estimates indicate a decline of volumes of around 5%. But the positive was the FMCG excluding cigarettes segment, which saw return to profitability coming in at around 20 crores as against a loss in the previous comparable quarter. We did see some slackness in the agricultural, paper boards and hotels business, but on the whole it was a quiet quarter as far as ITC is concerned.
Now, in other earnings, Indian Oil Corporation saw its net profit fall in the second quarter as the company suffered inventory losses. Profits dropped 18% and came in at 3,696 crore rupees, well below estimates. Revenues too saw a fall of 14% in the second quarter of FY18. Gross refining margin of oil firm rose to $7.98 a barrel from $4.3 a barrel in the previous quarter. However, this too was well short of analyst estimates. Bhanvi Arora caught up with Sanjeev Singh, chairman of IOC, who says GST had an impact of 300 crore rupees on their profits. However, he expected GRMs to be better in FY18.
GRM is driven by the physical performance as well as the margins between the products and the crude. As I said earlier, the physical numbers were better this year, so we are very confident that as far as the physical performance is concerned, we did extremely well. And rest all is driven by the margins which we had between the crude and the products. So 7.98, the weighted average number for all the refineries put together, in our opinion, is a reasonable number. And if we discount the inventory impact, then the net GRM comes to around $9.14 per barrel.
Okay, so what is your outlook on GRMs for the remaining financial year?
Extremely difficult to predict because physical performance is something which is in our hand, while the margins are something which is not in our hand. But going by any reasonable number, I think they should not be lower than what we are achieving now.
What has been the impact of GST on the company's financials?
This for the first quarter when we had did the quarterly accounting on the even after GST implementation. Based on the booking done so far for the quarter, we had an impact of nearly 300 crores on our profit and loss.
Now, what's up with the markets? It was a mixed day in trade for Indian markets. The Sensex ended the day largely unchanged, while the Nifty incurred slim losses. Among individual sectors, Healthcare Index gained over half a percentage point, and Telecom Index, which lost over a whopping 5%. Among individual stocks, Bajaj Finance, Adani Ports and Sun Pharma clocked in handsome gains, while Infratel, Yes Bank and India Oil suffered losses. That was the update for the day, but it was a very profitable week as a whole for the markets, with the Sensex posting gains over 2%, the best in over 7 months. Nifty also rose by over 1.5%. Neeraj Shah of Bloomberg Quinn sums up the weekly market action in this report.
It's a mixed week of trade because we did well for most part of the week, ended lower for the benchmark. So as you see, as the chart shows, a trending week for most part, 4 days. Friday session, a bit of a pullback. Similar chart for the Sensex as well. The mid caps and the small caps though had a different chart. The small cap index in particular gaining the most. So the Nifty small cap index will come up on your screen. That gained about 3.5% and trended beautifully for most part of the week and closed at highs as well. Specific stocks, the big news of the week was the PSU Bank recapitalization, and that led to all of these stocks. You look at the Nifty Bank or you look at any of the PSU banks, similar chart, a big surge on Wednesday and then a cool off that happened. So SBI, Can Bank, PNB, BOB, you look at any of these charts, they will look identical. Big moves on Wednesday, post that a bit of a cool off. Some results reactions, positive ones were seen in Z as well as Maruti. So Z ending the week well, gaining about 10% for the week. Maruti, Friday session when we got the results, but I think the market was anticipating some corporate action as well. So for the week as well, up about 5% in trade. Negative reactions seen for Yes Bank in particular, a big drag predominantly in Friday's session, but otherwise two came off. But Friday a big crack, as you can see towards the fag end of the screen, losing about 14%. HCL Tech came out with results Wednesday. Post the Wednesday move, I think it cracked quite significantly, ending about 7.5% lower. Some mid caps and which reacted negatively to numbers. GHCL, very poor quarter, ending about 14% off. Havells, the result disappointments and the reaction continued, down about 11% in trade. Just a couple of buzzing stocks that I do want to mark. One of them is Gujarat Fluorochem, and all fluorochem companies. Navin Fluorine too had a good move, but Gujarat Fluorochem, I'm just depicting it, 21% up for the week, and a bunch of mid-size, small-size infrastructure companies, PNC Infratech amongst them, ending up about 17.5%.
Now, in big international news, President Donald Trump is leaning towards appointing Federal Reserve Governor Jerome Powell to be the next chairman of the Fed. According to sources, of course, the decision isn't yet final, and Trump could change his mind at any time. Yet his preference for Powell reduces current Fed Chair Janet Yellen's chances for a second term at the helm of the world's leading central bank. Yellen's first term ends in February, of course, and Trump has been working from a short list of 5 candidates developed by his advisors that includes the current chair and Powell. The other candidates he's considering are Stanford University economist John Taylor, former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh, and National Economic Council Director Gary Cohn. Now, unexpected cheer coming in for the world's largest economy. The United States maintained a rather brisk pace of growth in the third quarter. Hurricanes Harvey and Irma were expected to adversely impact GDP growth, but GDP increased at a 3% annual rate after expanding at a rate of 3.1% in the previous quarter. Now, big news coming in from Europe. In an overwhelming vote for secession, Catalonia has voted for an independent state in the parliament. This, even as Spanish authorities prepare to take direct control of the region. Deputies in the regional assembly backed the motion for secession by a huge margin of 70 to 10 votes. This decision now escalates Spain's political crisis as the majority of anti-secessionists and the Spanish Prime Minister look to Madrid, activating direct rule in the region. Today's vote, however, is likely to be largely symbolic as the Spanish state imposes Article 155 to keep stability in Catalonia. The insurance regulator is considering a proposal that will allow private equity firms to promote Indian insurers. But it comes with a caveat. IRDAI is set to expect stricter long-term commitments. IRDAI sources indicate the regulator is close to arriving at final guidelines in the issue. So how is this proposed change in ownership rules likely to look like? Ridhima Saxena of Bloomberg Quint tells us in this report.
The Indian insurance regulator may tweak the ownership rules for insurance companies and allow private equity funds to become promoters. To give you some background, up until now, only foreign insurers and some established Indian corporate houses were allowed to become promoters, as this is a capital-intensive business that requires long-term investors. But now, IRDAI, which is the regulatory body for insurance, is mulling to bring in uniform guidelines for private equity investors so as to curb the premature exits made by them and to allow them to enter insurance companies as promoters. Some of the draft guidelines that will be discussed in the November board meeting of IRDAI would be, first, that there will be a capital lock-in requirement of 10 years, which means any PE fund looking to become a promoter in an insurance company will have to stay invested in it for at least 10 years. The second, that they will have to find a replacement in the form of a long-term investor in case they do want to exit before the 10-year lock-in period. And the third, that whenever there is a requirement for additional capital, the private equity fund will have to infuse it so as to meet the solvency requirements. The two companies that have sent proposals to IRDAI, which may directly benefit if this decision goes through, would be first Religare Enterprises Limited, that is looking to sell 80% of its stake in Religare Health Insurance to a consortium of investors led by True North, and the second being Star Health and Allied Insurance, that is also looking to sell its business to a private equity fund. So these may be the direct beneficiaries.
Now, the Madras High Court has dismissed a plea seeking to ban the Tamil blockbuster Mersal. The movie, which stars Tamil movie actor Vijay, is in the news for having some dialogues critical of GST and Digital India. The court held that the people's right to freedom of speech and expression applies to movies as well and dismissed the petition as devoid of any merit. The plea contended that the movie had scenes against India's sovereignty, integrity and security. Now, the High Court bench noted how political parties continue to criticize the government schemes like demonetization and GST and ruled out passing a gag order against political parties or movies, as that would infringe on the constitutional right or freedom of speech. Mersal released on October 18, which is the day of Diwali, and had stirred the hornet's nest with the BJP's Tamil Nadu unit taking exception to references on GST and Digital India. The controversy seems to have helped the movie makers fill their coffers. Now, just to dissect and analyze what this means today and what really happened in court, former Advocate General of Tamil Nadu, P.S. Raman, joins us on the phone line. He's also the counsel for Mersal's producers. Sir, thanks so much for speaking with us on Bloomberg Quint. Considering the court dismissed the plea ab initio, would you say this was a big win for free speech at the Madras High Court?
Absolutely. In fact, the Madras High Court Division Bench didn't even think it necessary to issue notice to the government or to the producers, even though we were ready to take notice if it was issued. They felt that the freedom of speech and expression through the expression through speeches is equally protected under Article 19(1)(a). And this actually is the line of judgments of the Supreme Court starting way back in 1989 in the celebrated case of S. Rangarajan versus Jagjeevan Ram. I'm going right up to 2011 in Prakash Jha Productions case, where they held that expressing one's opinion on a matter of public debate, nobody can have any quarrel with that. And once the film has gone through a certification by the Central Board of Film Censors, that's the end of the matter. Thereafter, the court is not going to review that.
Right, Mr.
And that's exactly what has happened in the present case as well.
Right, Mr. Raman, you know, it's interesting because last year around it was a similar situation. Well, not entirely. The facts of the case were different, of course. But with Udta Punjab, the Bollywood blockbuster here at the Bombay High Court. And I remember the film was eventually cleared after days of hearing with one cut. But, arguments were made from both sides. It's been a different situation here with Mersal, hasn't it?
Yeah, I do remember reading about the matter in the Bombay High Court. And it's a viewpoint. Finally they did go ahead with the release, though, as you said, they had indicated some cuts in the matter. But in Madras High Court, we have consistently taken this view, about 7-8 years back, again, sometime around 2006, 2007, almost 10 years back, when that famous Dawa, the film, the one with Tom Cruise or somebody, Dan Brown's film, was released in Tamil Nadu. There were some religious outlets which felt that it was showing Christianity in bad light, and the state government actually banned the film. And learned single judge of the court, relying on Jagjeevan Ram's case, that is the Rangarajan's case,
right,
struck down the ban, saying you have no right to ban the release of the film.
Right.
And you can't cite law and order as an issue.
Right.
And good 8 years later, same thing happened to Kamala Hassan's Vishwarupam.
Right. No, and
there again they cited public order. They said that if the film is released, there may be communal rioting, etc.
Yes.
So Madras High Court said, look, maintaining law and order is the state's problem.
Mm-hmm.
If public can't, if some sections of the public can't take a viewpoint, then it's too bad for them. They'll have to just grin and bear it.
Right, but also, Mr. Raman, because also in this situation, is it also because the censor board really had already cleared the film? So does that really have any impact on what happened today, dismissing it right at the start?
Come again, I didn't get you, sorry?
Considering the censor board had already cleared the movie, sir, that has a bearing on it.
That's exactly the point. In fact, in that S. Rangarajan versus Jagjeevan Ram, as well as in Prakash Jha's case, the point which Supreme Court has laid down is that under the Cinematograph Act, there is a body constituted called the Central Board of Film Censors, which comprises of various people, stakeholders, people in the arts, people from the public, etc., social workers. And once they have seen a film and they felt it good enough to certify it for public exhibition, there cannot be a second review over that by courts or by public itself. The public can't say, no, even though censor certificate has been given, we think this particular scene is bad, that particular dialogue is bad, and try to go to town on that and stop for the film's release being stopped, or even to disrupt the continued exhibition of the film. Courts have come down on that very heavily and said nothing doing.
Right, Mr. Raman.
In fact, the only aberration in this entire thing, I think, is some years back when the water riparian rights issue between some states in southern India was heading to a slightly boiling point, both Kaveri as well as Mullai Periyar. At that time, one particular film which dealt with that issue was stopped, and the Supreme Court somehow sorted that for a small period of time, they said the film should not be released. That's possibly a only aberration I can think of on freedom of speech and expression. Right. with regard to future flows.
Mr. Raman, thanks so much for taking our time and joining us on Prime Time. Well, it turns out a big win for free speech at the Madras High Court. Now, moving on, Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee has challenged Aadhaar yet again. The state government of Bengal has filed a petition in the Supreme Court challenging notifications under the Aadhaar Act. This move by Mamata Banerjee comes only 2 days after she had said that she would not link her mobile to her Aadhaar, even if it meant her connection getting snapped. Now, the Supreme Court is set to hear the West Bengal government's petition next Monday. Now, the Rajasthan High Court today issued a notice to the centre on the controversial ordinance which seeks to protect public servants from being investigated without prior government sanction. The ordinance has received criticism, with the petitioners arguing that it violates the basic right to free speech. The High Court today heard the 7 writ petitions filed by the opposition and has scheduled the next hearing on November 27th. Now, while political parties in Gujarat are coming up with grand schemes to woe voters, all that the villagers of Valsad district want is clean water. In fact, the villagers have threatened to boycott the state elections and have been protesting against water pollution in the area by the surrounding factories. Have a look.
गांव के नज़दीक करीब में एक रिसोल नामक कंपनी है। वहां पे पूरा प्रदूषित पानी छोड़ा जाता है भूगर्भ में, जिसके कारण गांव के सभी लोगों को पानी मिनरल वाटर लेके पीना पड़ता है। गांव के आजू बाजू सब लोग यहाँ पे है, वो सब आदिवासी लोग हैं। वो अपने पशुओं को पानी पिलाने के लिए भी आज दिक्कत हो रही है।
हमने उसके बारे में पहले पंचायत में भी उसके लिए अप्लाई किया है। उसके आगे हमने कलेक्टर को भी आवेदन पत्र दिया है, लेकिन वहाँ से मीडिया वाले भी लेके जा चुके हैं, लेकिन कहीं से भी हमको पॉजिटिव रिप्लाई नहीं मिला है। तो हमें डिसाइड किया हुआ है दोनों गांव के रोला और सोनवाड़ा के बीच में कि इस टाइम जो विधानसभा की 2017 की जो इलेक्शन आ रही है, चुनाव की बहिष्कार करके हम उसको दिखा दें कि जनशक्ति कितनी इम्पोर्टेंस है यहाँ पे, क्योंकि हमारे जनजीवन पे इतना असर हो चुका है। सभी बूढ़े बच्चे भी उसके प्रभाव में आ चुके हैं।
यहाँ पर लोगों के अपने अपने वेस्टेड इंटरेस्ट हैं, अपने अपने तरीके से वो इंडस्ट्रीज को चलाना चाहते हैं, जो कि संभव है नहीं। अभी जब लोग आए थे, वो लोग गांव के लोग ही थे, सरपंच भी थे, पुलिस भी थी साथ में, सबके साथ में अंदर फैक्ट्री के अंदर जहां पर पानी का जो इशू बता रहे थे वहाँ विजिट कराया गया। वहाँ पर इस तरह की कोई भी बात नज़र में नहीं आई है। फ्लोटिंग वाटर है, पानी बह रहा है वहाँ पर, और एब्सोल्युटली थिंग्स आर क्लियर।
सब लोगों ने बहुत कोशिश की, सरकारी तंत्र की मिलीभगत के कारण यहाँ पे कुछ उसके लिए एक्शन नहीं ले पा रहा है। सरकार मिली हुई है, ऐसा लोगों का कहना है। इसीलिए गांव के सभी लोगों ने मिलकर एक निर्णय किया है, स्वतंत्र से इस विधानसभा चुनाव के लिए कोई भी वोटिंग नहीं करेगा, ऐसा निर्णय किया गया है। और सब लोग इसके लिए तटस्थ रहेंगे और वोटिंग नहीं करेंगे। और आगामी दिन में जो इसका निर्णय नहीं आएगा तो हम लोग सब मिलकर एक बड़ा आंदोलन करेंगे।
Okay, fun fact, when you're watching us now on Bloomberg Quint Primetime and your quiz friend asks you a question, who's the richest man in the world? Don't fall for the bait and say it's Bill Gates, because Jeff Bezos just became the richest man in the world earlier today after adding nearly $7 billion to his wealth overnight. Amazon's share price surging this morning in the US after its earnings report. Now, Bezos' wealth shot up to more than $90 billion. That put Bezos past Bill Gates to become the richest man in the world. Gates also added to his fortune this morning with the rise in Microsoft stock after its earnings. But his gain of around $550 million put his fortune at $88.5 billion, not good enough to stay ahead of Bezos. Okay, now it's time for the prime time chat. Just like we told you at the start of the show, there seems to be a lot of demand for Apple's iPhone 10. But meeting this huge demand with supply is perhaps Apple's biggest challenge of all time. Numerous reports from Bloomberg suggest that Apple is facing a series of supply-side issues, which could ultimately be a dampener for the tech major's sales. Just how grave are these issues, and will this hurt consumer sentiment? To discuss this, I'm joined by Corey Johnson of Bloomberg News and Tarun Pathak, Associate Director at Counterpoint Research. Guys, thanks so much for joining us on Bloomberg Quinn. Corey, I want to start by asking you, what has really led to this supply problem at Apple with the iPhone 10?
Well, you know, some could have called it a demand success rather than a supply problem, right? They've got a lot of demand for this phone globally. They've certainly added a lot of new features to this phone. And so there's some degree of where they really have to go back and start everything over again, that the architecture of this phone is so very different than anything they have made or anyone has made before, the facial recognition, the size of the phone, and so on, that they really do have to start from scratch here. But there's also tremendous demand for the phone. There are no supply problems on popular products. It's a very popular product, and the global demand for it, as witnessed by the early orders taken last night, is evidence of that.
You know, Corey, even back here in India, it seems to be sold out on Amazon and on a local e-commerce player, Flipkart. But I'm also saying this because, you know, the pieces that we've read on Bloomberg as well, saying the biggest problem, and I quote this piece, the dot projector is at the heart of Apple's production problems. And it seems that they've had issues with suppliers and vendors. And although, when it comes to facial ID, there was also talk that perhaps it won't be the same facial ID that was advertised in the big launch event.
Yeah, we'll see the quality of that, and I think that that's a big bogey in terms of what could happen with the sales of this phone, how successful facial ID is, and how much consumers really like it. Because early complaints about that would be a problem for Apple. But because the product's not in the marketplace, I think we're going to have to categorize a lot of these things as rumors and unknowns at this point. What is clear is that they were able to ship the iPhone 8 much earlier than they're able to ship this iPhone 10. And the technology in the iPhone 10 is the big difference there, right? So clearly the technology in this phone is one of the holdups. I think there's also something about Apple's secrecy sort of writ large at the company, where they keep everything they're working on so secret that the developments that they're working on, that their suppliers and other companies that they work with can't really get ahead of the game, because Apple's not going to tell them what they want to be in that phone. So really, it is from the announcement, from the get-go, that the real production efforts have to begin. It's not before that, and as a result, you know, the announcement happens, and there's a lag before they can actually get the product together and together at scale.
All right, I'm going to get Tarun in on this chat as well. Tarun, thanks so much for joining us. I want to understand, you know, with all your numbers that Neil and your team have actually been working on at Counterpoint Research, well, the iPhone 8 didn't seem to be a very successful proposition when it comes to Apple. iPhone 8 and 8 Plus, it seems like a lot of people were waiting for the iPhone 10, especially here in India. Do you think that this is something that's a concern, especially if there's a supply not matching, well, the demand?
Correct. First of all, thanks for having me here. So if you look at, like you have rightly pointed out, looks like the demand for iPhone 10 has been massive. But if you look at demand for iPhone 8, the preliminary checks from Counterpoint Research suggest that the demand for iPhone 8 has been soft across different regions. And it's not an ideal situation for any company to have this demand versus supply mismatch, especially for a company like Apple, which has been traditionally known for its strong supply chain requirements. So what that essentially means is this will leave Apple to three different situations. Either this particular demand will shift to the upcoming quarters, Q1, Q2, or what will happen is part of this demand will shift towards iPhone 8, iPhone 8 series. Now, there is another alternative which can happen in Q4 is most of the users try to look for switching to Android or upgrading from Android to Android camp. So that has been critical for Apple, because if you look at iPhone 10, that could have tempted a lot of users from the Android camp to join or enter the iOS ecosystem. Now, that's an opportunity lost for Apple if this demand versus supply gap exceeds. So I think the number 3, which I have pointed, is very critical for Apple going forward, because if users from Android camp upgrade within Android, so for example, if a potential user of say S7 is looking to upgrade to iPhone 10, he or she may not wait for a couple of quarters and ended up buying or upgrading to Android ecosystem within the holiday season. So that's going to be very critical for Apple.
Very interesting, Tarun. And, taking that point, Corey, and that's something that, well, investors have been fretting over, especially if Apple can't match well that demand, or if there's issues, especially whether, you'd have consumers or potential buyers, flocking over to maybe Samsung or, OnePlus. Is that a concern?
Yeah. Well, I think that the way that Apple's changed a lot of their billing procedures, where they've got users pre-ordering the phone, paying on a monthly basis to get whatever the latest update is, kind of locks them into the iPhone system and keeps them from going into Android phones, whether it's Samsung or whatever. And furthermore, what we know from the studies that have looked at this is that the people who switch from the Android ecosystem to the Apple ecosystem stay. It is a very sticky ecosystem, and the user experience is such that the users just tend to stay with that system, and once they've gone to an iPhone, they tend to replace it with another iPhone, not going back to Samsung. Certainly there are exceptions, but globally what we've seen is that people who go to the iPhone platform stay there. And so Apple has changed their billing procedures also, so there's a lot of users subscribe to the phone, pay on a monthly basis, and get whatever the new phone is. As a result, they've been paying for this upgrade. They're going to get it when the phone's out and when the phone's ready to ship. It also, therefore, provides a bumper, if you will, for Apple to have when they have production problems. It doesn't matter because the sale's baked in, and a consumer that's getting the phone 3 weeks later than they want it is going to get it anyway.
But Corey, this isn't characteristically Apple. Even this talk about perhaps, a different quality. I wouldn't say inferior, but a different quality as compared to what was promised on the facial ID, considering that facial ID was one of the key features. It's not just 3D sensors they've had an issue with. Well, that's one supply problem perhaps that's reported. But the second issue that they've also had is with, of course, their OLED screens. It was the first time that they were jumping from LCD displays to OLED displays. And there were issues with Samsung there as well, considering it was the only supplier of these screens.
Yeah, the OLED screen has been something that's been a long time coming, but Apple's embrace of this has really changed the demand curve, or the supply curve, I should say, for those devices. But certainly the reason they're switching to it is because the screen, by all accounts, is really a breathtaking display. And the question is how much are consumers really going to be willing to make that jump, or we can continue to see a migration from the Android system to the iPhone. We shall see when the device is out there in size.
Right, Corey. Tarun, also, another deterrent that I see really is, and we did a show here on Bloomberg Quint as well, where we actually went out to a lot of people here in Mumbai and asked them about the price tag, because the iPhone 10 out here, one being the wait for it, two being whether you actually get it after you've pre-ordered it today, because after 12:13 in the afternoon, it all seems sold out on Amazon and Flipkart. And the third thing being that it's 89,000 rupees. That's actually, 40% more than how much I'd spend in the US. Is that going to be a big deterrent for them?
I think
it is. So if you look at the price of iPhone 10, it is
the size of the market.
Right, Corey. No, so that was a question I was posing to Tarun actually. Tarun, do you think that's going to be a big deterrent when it comes to selling the iPhone 10, and especially people who are, perhaps migrating from Android when Samsung has a formidable contender there, as does Google with the Pixel 2, which is launching actually just in a few minutes from now here at the launch party is in New Delhi.
Correct. So again, two parts to it. There are some hardcore Apple loyal users. So if you look at India market as a whole, the premium market. So if we dissect it, the number of phones which are sold above 50,000 in India, that's just 500,000 units per quarter, which is a very, very small quantity if you look at the size of the Indian market. So if we further dissect that 500,000 users, so with international warranty coming in with India, so a lot of people traveling across or other states might get in from other regions. What this will impact is the users who are looking for, like for example, last year iPhone 7 users who are looking to buy iPhone 10, that can be a major deterrent because the price is definitely very high, and that doesn't hold true for iPhone 10 but also for the iPhone 8 and iPhone 8 Plus series. So now if you look at in the past couple of weeks, there are a lot of promotional offers which not only operators but other players are looking into bundling it with certain offers which have never been in India. So to make sure that the upfront cost of this particular device remains lesser by almost like $50 to $100. That remains to be seen how people react to the. There are a lot of sentiments floating around right now around iPhone 10, but the actual demand will be can be seen once this particular device is in the hands of the users and with the feedback floating in. Then it's going to be really critical to see how many people again jumps from Android to iOS ecosystem or upgrade from Android to Android.
You know, it's interesting, Corey, because while they have been pitching, Apple's been fantastic at marketing, while they've been pitching, well, facial ID as this breakthrough, revolutionary, standard-setting feature, well, we've seen some form of facial ID in a lot of other phones in India as well. As there's no dearth of manufacturers who actually use facial ID, Samsung being one. It's a very popular device as well. But it seems to be that when Apple really sets the trend when it comes to these features, be it facial ID and getting rid of the fingerprint sensor, getting rid of the 3.5mm jack as well. It seems to be setting up a new industry benchmark every time.
They used to refer to this as a Steve Jobs reality distortion field. That things that were completely untrue, if Steve were to say them, they became true because he said them. Well, the reality distortion field is alive and well at Cupertino, California, at Apple headquarters, because if they say it's brand new and revolutionary, then by gosh, it's brand new and revolutionary, whether it is or it isn't. And Apple's been at that for decades, and they continue to do so. But because of the size of this device in the market, because it's so singularly successful, the iPhones have been in the past, and this one may well be, and indeed this may be the best-selling phone ever. But it will certainly set a standard because it will be the phone in people's hands. It's also worth noting that in an industry with so many players, that while Apple may have only, say, 30% market share because of the high prices we've been talking about, because of all the features they cram into the phone and that are so expensive, they might only have 30% market share, but they have well over 80% of the profits in the industry. So they, unlike the Apple of many decades ago, they are very conscious about very high gross margins, high operating margins, and taking a lot of profit. They're very happy with 30% market share as long as they get most of the share of the industry's profits.
Right, Corey. Tarun, I also wanted to ask you, it's always interesting, especially on all these tech blogs all over the world, because as soon as, well, this pre-order news came out, there's also been news all over, all websites about the iPhone 9's design being leaked and stuff like that. Obviously, none of it is corroborated yet, but it's interesting because, well, effectively speaking, in a few months from now, 7-8 months from now, there might just be a new iPhone. That's not all, right? If you talk even about this immersive display, something that we were talking to Neil at Counterpoint earlier when the iPhone 10 was actually launched, was that this isn't really a bezel-less display. There is some sort of a bezel at the top. When it comes to other immersive displays, they're saying that OnePlus is now coming out with a new model as well with an immersive display, and you have it well on even cheaper budget phones here in India, on LG phones. You also have it, of course, on the Samsung phones, on the flagships. Do you think that these are features that will hold them in good stead in a market where they're actually trying to really get more market share in India?
Right. So basically, if we talk about the basic underlying fact why iPhone sells so well across the world is, leaving apart from spec, it is the aspirational value of this particular brand which helps it to record a large number of sales across all the different regions. So if you look at here in India, this holds true. The aspirational value attached to this particular brand is very, very high. So in fact, if you ask any particular college-going student here whether he or she would like to have an iPhone, the answer 9 out of 10, it will be yes. But the second question, if you ask them whether you can afford an iPhone, and that's the really interesting question, because here in India, they just want to buy an iPhone irrespective of whatever generation it is. So it might not be the latest, but it should be an iPhone. So that is something, because India is a very diverse and different market from the rest of the world. If you look at it, it's the fastest growing market. At the same time, it also has a lot of feature phone users. So yes, there are a lot of players who are offering different specs, but the real selling point for Apple in India and obviously across the world is the aspirational value which is attached to this particular brand, which is very, very high.
Right, Corey, as the last question, you were talking about the Apple ecosystem and how Apple really locks you into that ecosystem. But when it comes to tech giants all over Silicon Valley, be it, well, even Amazon or even what Google's really doing, they are trying to lock you into, even OnePlus really trying to lock you into that ecosystem. And there are a lot of fans here, especially back in India, of stock Android and that experience. And that's why Google's perhaps tied up with a lot of OEMs, a lot of manufacturers here, including Nokia at HMD Global and other companies, Motorola as well, to give that stock Android experience. Because sometimes people lack that freedom with those security patches and updates. But it's a different story altogether in the US, isn't it?
You know, the products can be a little bit somewhat similar, right? They do some of the same stuff. Some of the apps work on both phones, or their versions for each kind of phone and each kind of device. But the business model behind it is diametrically different. And I think that because with the consumer-facing aspect is what it is, we tend to put them together and think of Google versus Amazon, or sorry, Google versus Apple, or Samsung versus Apple. But really, the Apple business model, which is use this device, pay us for the device, get some services on the side, is completely different from the Google business model, which is Google will spend fortunes, billions of dollars developing software and give it away to phone operators, so the phone operators will give them phones that gives information to Google and uses Google's apps to put eyeballs in front of ads that Google is selling. It's an advertising model where the consumer is the product and the consumer's eyeballs are the product, and the phones and the ecosystem is merely a methodology to get out to those consumers. Whereas the Apple system is very different from that, where it's give us your money, you can have the device and do what you will with it. We're going to keep all of your data and everything else secret and internal at Apple. It's a very different business model, and I think the result is the profits from the industry in the phone business go to Apple. The profits for the use of the phones goes to Google. It's a completely different model.
Absolutely, Corey. Thanks so much. I really appreciate you and Tarun joining us on Primetime on Bloomberg Quint. Well, it turns out the Apple iPhone 10, the flagship that you're waiting for, is already sold out at the pre-order stage for now. Now, well, we're going to leave you with our final story of the day. New India is the mission that Prime Minister Modi has talked about, and it needs some young blood CEOs, of course. And Avni Biani is certainly one of them. The younger daughter of Future Group top boss Kishore Biani is leading one of India's up-and-coming luxury retail brands and has her eyes set on higher targets. So what's the success mantra? Tamanna Inamdar of Bloomberg Quint caught up with Avni in one of her stores to find out just that. And that's exactly what we're going to leave you with. Thanks so much for tuning in to this show.
Hi, welcome to Bloomberg Quint. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. I'm speaking today with Avni Biani, the 27-year-old daughter of Kishore Biani, and more importantly, concept head of Food Hall, which is a premium food luxury brand, I would say, Avni?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
That's a good way to describe it.
Okay, thanks so much for speaking with Bloomberg Quint. And why don't you start by describing Food Hall and why Food Hall?
I think, I don't know about why Food Hall, but I think Food Hall is a luxury destination for all food lovers. I think, you know, one of our mission statements over there states that we've committed ourselves to indulging and making all food lovers experience food like they've never experienced food before. So I think it's a destination, you know, where people can not only experience and grocery shop for food, but also, you know, maybe sit and grab a bite, you know, do some interesting tea tastings, cheese tastings, and whatnot.
Okay, so what's the differentiator about Food Hall is the question. And you know, I know Avni doesn't like to do this, but I think we should show our viewers what we mean when we're talking about Food Hall. Sure. You know, and when you're talking about tasting sections, should we start from here, where you have a Middle East version of Indian mithai?
So right now, actually, what's happening is you've just come pre-Diwali, so the store's in a bit of a transition mode. So you're seeing just some remnants of what happened with Diwali, but I think what we do, and we call this our demo kitchens or our chef's table at each store. And I think the idea behind the chef's table is that how do you use it as a multidisciplinary space. So every month we do new themes. So last month we were celebrating matcha, we were celebrating coconut yogurt. We were, so whatever new things we celebrate, some of that comes on the chef's table. And the chef's table also is used to do demos, activations, a lot of master classes, talks, etc., etc. So we really use this as a multidisciplinary space where people can come, they can learn how to cook certain ingredients, they can maybe taste something new, they can come and sit around for a master class. So all sorts of fun things happen.
Okay, what's interesting about food hall is also the kind of people who would shop here.
Yeah.
Because I've come and shopped here before, and you have vine tomatoes, which are like some $1,500 a kilo or something more than that. You have Atlantic salmon, you have avocado, really fancy stuff.
Yeah. So we have a saying in food hall where we believe that one has to give everything and anything an Indian consumer desires. So we also do Gucci mushrooms from Kashmir. Our saffron that comes out of this brand is really natural Kashmiri saffron all the way from, and I can assure you that the quality is phenomenal. The vanilla pods are coming in from Kerala. So I think that it's not only about focusing on exotic ingredients, it's also about focusing on everything that's, local and that needs to be celebrated. So we also celebrate Kamal Kakri. We love celebrating peas in winter because, how do you give customers the best peas that are available of produce in winter along with strawberries. So I think it's all about celebrating what's local, what's seasonal, what's fresh, along with also what's exotic. Yes, we do tomatoes on vine. We do, have a avocado bar over here, which allows us to sell, 60 kilos of avocados.
Actually, that's an interesting part to show.
Yeah, because people can get their own, people can get their own guacamoles made, and people can get their own, guacamole made. So it's just a way for customers to understand what to do with an avocado. So many customers when we started food hall wanted to buy an avocado and didn't know what to do with it. So it was a good way for us to say, okay, you buy avocado, we'll make you, guacamole free of cost. So, so I think in that sense, it is exciting, and there is a lot of, new products, like for example, purple corn, that, you otherwise don't see.
I have actually never seen purple corn.
Yeah.
I doubt anyone has. So where does it comes from? Mexico?
Yeah, this actually comes from Mexico or Peru.
So, who are the kind of people who buy this produce? Because you're saying you cater to the Indian palate.
I'm not saying we cater to the Indian palate. I'm saying that anything that's local, that's seasonal, that's fresh, that deserves to be celebrated, one celebrates at food hall. I think, and I also think that food hall is actually the first format in our group that is, we've been very cognizant of the fact that it's not for everyone, and it's not a format that we designed to be a very mass format. So 30% of our customer base is expatriates, and the rest of them are, well-heeled, well-traveled Indians like, who've traveled the globe and want to cook different food at home, who want to try out new food for their families, who are fond of cooking, who are passionate of cooking, who like trying out new trends.
So different from the rest of the group, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very
different. Philosophy of
it's very different from the rest of the group. We love focusing on, giving people things like hard to find ingredients. Just behind us, there's a big aisle that says superfoods, and we focus on ancient grains. We focus on so many cold-pressed oils.
That's actually interesting to show.
We focus on trending ingredients.
We should take a second to show what you mean by ancient grains, because I know that this is a fad right now for everyone who's conscious about their diet.
I don't know if it's necessarily a fad, but I think over time, if you see it in restaurants, you see it in so many cafes, quinoa, even foxtail millet, amaranth, they're all making their way slowly into people's home food again. People are beginning to have bajra khichdi, which up until some time ago was not cool anymore, has suddenly become cool. I think food trends keep on changing, and I also think that people want to innovate. Everyone's bored of eating the same food again and again. So food hall has to really keep on thinking about how do we constantly excite the customer, how do we constantly keep on giving them something new, what are the new trends in the globe, what are new trends around the world, what are the new trends that are happening in the stores, what are customers really looking for?
I know you all don't share specific numbers, not a listed entity, but
we're part of Future Retail, so we share numbers.
So what can you share with us in terms of growth of food hall? You have 6, 7 stores?
Yeah, so as I was telling you earlier, we have 7 stores of food hall. you know, we actually have more than 7 stores. We have five food hall stores, and we have a concept called little food halls, you know, which are really prominent in our central high definition stores, which is a fashion departmental store of the group. So we have 5 big food halls, and in fact in the coming year, by the end of 2018, we'll have 3 more. So we'll be having a big store that's launching in Chanakyapuri in the next 20 days, and then we have a store coming up in Gurgaon, and then we have a very large format coming up in Bandra, you know, where we're looking at doing a 25,000 new format of food hall, you know, with a cookery studio and many more experiences, a cafe, many more smaller vendors coming in, a restaurant, etc., etc. I think it's too premature to talk about that, but yeah.
What about growth year on year? What kind of growth do you see?
I think with food hall, we've been fortunate enough to easily see a growth of 20 to 25% year on year. Really? You know, which is, you know, the store is our oldest store. It's in its 7th year of operations now, and it still is clocking 20-25% growth for us.
Is a brand like Food Hall, just curious, making money because you're importing really high value products?
So we are importing high value products, but we're also working with many suppliers in the country to do so. You know, so it's not only about us importing it. I think the brand of Food Hall does make money, and it is a profitable format, even though electricity costs and rent costs can be high, because we work on different margins. You know, this model of Food Hall ends up giving us more margins than a typical food store would.
You and Dad, does he guide you? How do you run the business? Is it in the genes? Because
I think so. I think he definitely does guide us. We've been, my sister and I have probably spent our entire childhood on the shop floors.
Are we live?